Have you ever been left out, ignored in a conversation, not invited to the party, the last one picked for the team? Of course you have. We all have. It's this universally awful feeling. But here's a much tougher question. Have you ever been the one doing the excluding? And if you have, why'd you do it? Today we're going to flip this script and try to understand the mind of the person who excludes. So get this. This exact thing happened to a psychologist, Dr. Kip Williams, while he was just hanging out in a park one day. I mean, it seems like such a small thing, right? A frisbee game. But the sting of being suddenly cut out was so powerful that it actually inspired him to spend his entire career studying the deep, deep pain of being ostracized. His story is pretty much legendary in this field of study. And we always focus on Kip's experience, the person who got left out. But what about the other side of that coin? What was going on with those two guys? Why did they just suddenly decide to exclude him? And maybe more importantly, how did they feel about doing it? That's the real mystery we're diving into. Now, you'd probably think that excluding someone is a power move, that it makes you feel good or in control. But the research, well, it points to something way more complicated. It turns out being the one who does the ostracizing can actually be a surprisingly negative experience. Okay, so this slide really puts it all side by side. On the left, yeah, that's the pain of the target, the person being excluded. We know that feeling. But look at the right side. That's the surprising cost to the person doing the excluding. It's not power. It's this general unpleasantness, guilt, shame, and even what they call cognitive drain. It's mentally exhausting. This isn't a win-lose situation at all. A lot of the time, it's actually lose-lose. And that right there, that brings us to the central paradox. If it hurts the person being left out, and it feels bad for the person doing the leaving out, why is it such a common, everyday human behavior? There has to be some kind of powerful underlying reason that we're willing to pay that psychological price. And that reason, according to some really compelling research, often boils down to one thing: protecting the group. The theory goes that ostracism isn't always just random cruelty. It can actually be a tool, a mechanism to deal with a very specific type of person. And that person is called a burdensome group member. I want you to think of it like a social calculation. In any group, a work team, friends, family, we have this unspoken expectation that everyone pulls their own weight. A burdensome member is someone who, for whatever reason, just takes more from the group than they give back. They create this imbalance that threatens the whole group's success, or even just its vibe. So what does burdensome actually look like? Well, it can be a lot of different things. It might be the person who's constantly breaking the group's unwritten rules. Or, that person in your project group who does sloppy work and slows everybody else down. It could even just be someone whose personality is so disagreeable that it makes it impossible for everyone else to cooperate. Really, it's any behavior that acts like a drag on what the group is trying to accomplish. Okay, so that's the theory. A nice, neat idea. But how on earth do you prove it? Well, researchers came up with this really clever experiment using a simple virtual game to see if people would, completely on their own, start to ostracize someone who was being a burden. The game is called Cyberball. Here's how it works. A participant thinks they're playing a simple online game of catch with two other people. But here's the trick. The other players are actually just computer-controlled avatars. This is brilliant because it lets the researchers program one of those avatars to behave in a very specific, burdensome way. And then they can just sit back and watch how the real human participant reacts. So how do they make one of the players a burden? It was actually super simple. They just made them slow, frustratingly slow. So while one player would toss the ball back after a normal 3 to 5 seconds, the burdensome player would hold onto it for a full 16 seconds. Every single time. It just dragged the whole game down. And the results? Whoa, they were not subtle at all. Just look at the difference in these bars. The tall bar on the left, that's how many times people threw the ball to the normal player. And that tiny little bar on the right, that's how few tosses the slow, burdensome player got. Without anyone telling them to, people just stopped playing with them. They cut them out. But here's the part that really blows my mind. In another version of the experiment, the researchers gave people a perfectly good excuse. They told them, hey, that one player is slow because they have a really bad internet connection. So it's not their fault, right? Did that make a difference? Not at all. People still excluded them. That reaction to the burden was so immediate, so powerful, that it just steamrolled right over any logical reason for it. So why? Why is this reaction so strong, so automatic? Why do we ostracize someone even when we know it's not their fault? The answer seems to be buried deep in our brains in a kind of primitive defense mechanism. It turns out that interacting with a burdensome person isn't just, annoying. It actually triggers something much, much deeper inside us. And what it triggers is something researchers call psychological pain. Now, this isn't just a metaphor. Think about the sound of nails on a chalkboard. That cringy, deeply uncomfortable feeling, that's a form of psychological pain. It's an internal alarm telling you that something is just wrong. Well, dealing with a burdensome person can trigger a very similar, nasty response in our brains. This pain is essentially an alarm system. It works just like physical pain. When you touch a hot stove, the pain is a signal that screams, "Pull your hand back now." In the same way, dealing with a burdensome person sends a psychological pain signal that screams, "Danger, the group is threatened." So, and this is the crucial part, what's the fastest way to silence a blaring, annoying alarm? You get rid of whatever is causing the noise. Ostracism, from this perspective, is the social version of pulling your hand from the hot stove. It's this motivated, almost reflexive action to stop the psychological pain by just removing the person who's causing it. Okay, this pain alarm theory is incredibly powerful. But of course, it's not the entire story. It actually opens up a whole new set of fascinating and much more complicated questions about why we exclude people. One big idea is that our response might actually happen in two stages. First, you've got the reflexive, gut-level reaction. That's the instant alarm going off. Burden detected. That's what makes us want to exclude someone even if they have a bad internet connection. It basically errs on the side of caution to protect the group first, ask questions later. But then, a more reflective, thoughtful response can kick in, where our brains start to consider the context and maybe, just maybe, override that first impulse. And the idea of what's burdensome gets really complex too. I mean, it's one thing to exclude someone who is objectively bad at a task, right? That's a literal burden. But what about a symbolic burden? This is where things get really tricky. Think about heated arguments online. The person you're arguing with isn't slowing you down on a project, but their totally different worldview can feel like a direct threat to your group's identity and values. The threat is subjective, it's in your head, but that exclusionary response can be every bit as strong. Which kind of leaves us here. If ostracism is this deep-seated psychological defense mechanism that's designed to protect our groups from people who might weigh them down, does that make it a necessary evil? Or is that just a convenient excuse for a behavior that is, at its core, a deeply painful and destructive social weapon? That really is the tension at the very heart of the other side of exclusion.